Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going all the way back to ancient Greece.
Ancient Greece.
Yeah, to explore an idea that has fascinated thinkers for centuries.
Ooh, centuries. Okay, and what's that?
Immortality.
Immortality.
Yeah.
So not just like living a long time.
No. We're talking about the soul's potential to exist beyond the physical world.
I see.
Specifically, we'll be unpacking Plato's theory of immortality.
Plato's.
As presented in episode 16
Okay.
of our series.
I like it.
And we're going to be using Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy
Oh, a classic.
to kind of help us navigate the twists and turns of this journey.
Okay.
Now, Plato's Greece wasn't all togas and philosophical debates.
It wasn't.
No.
What was it then?
It was a world in flux,
Influx.
with city-states grappling for power and grappling with profound questions
Ooh, profound questions. Like what?
about the best way to live and govern.
Ah, I see. So like a real-life drama unfolding on the stage of history. Exactly. So to understand Plato, we kind of need to understand his world, right?
Right. And one of the key tensions in ancient Greece
Okay.
was this balance between individual liberty and social cohesion.
Individual liberty and social cohesion.
Right. Think of it like this.
Okay.
On one side, you have Sparta,
Sparta.
a society built on military discipline
Right.
and unwavering loyalty to the state.
Okay.
Individual desires were secondary to the needs of the collective.
Okay. So kind of like a tightly knit sports team where everyone knows their role
Exactly.
and works together for the win.
Yes.
Okay. I like that analogy.
And on the other side, you have Athens, a bustling democracy
Okay.
where individual expression
Mm-hmm.
and critical thinking were highly valued.
Ah, interesting. So this clash of perspectives between the rigid order of Sparta and the dynamic energy of Athens
Yeah.
must have had a pretty profound impact on philosophical thought, right?
It's like two different recipes for building a society, each with its own strengths and weaknesses.
Interesting.
And as the power of the city-state declined
Mm-hmm.
and empires like Macedonia and Rome rose,
Okay.
the focus of philosophy began to shift.
Oh, how so?
Thinkers started to grapple with more individualistic and spiritual questions,
Okay.
moving away from a focus on the citizen's duty to the state
Uh-huh.
towards a more personal exploration of ethics and the meaning of life.
It makes sense. As the world expands, so do our questions.
Right.
And this brings us to Plato, a philosopher deeply embedded in this changing world.
Now, Plato wasn't just pondering these questions in a vacuum.
He wasn't.
No. He was heavily influenced by earlier thinkers,
Like,
particularly Pythagoras.
Pythagoras the triangle guy.
Yeah.
I remember struggling with this theorem in geometry class.
Me too.
Yeah. But Pythagoras, he saw those triangles and squares as more than just geometric shapes.
Oh, hey.
He believed they held the key to understanding the universe, a kind of cosmic code embedded in the very fabric of reality.
So it wasn't just about solving for X.
No.
It was about decoding the secrets of existence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And one of Pythagoras's most intriguing ideas was the concept of the harmony of the spheres.
Harmony of the spheres.
Yes, the notion that celestial bodies,
Okay.
like planets and stars, move in accordance with mathematical ratios,
Uh-huh.
creating a kind of celestial music
Wow.
that resonates throughout the universe.
So the cosmos is a giant symphony
Yes,
orchestrated by mathematical principles.
exactly. And how did this influence Plato?
Yeah, how did this influence Plato?
Well, Plato was captivated by this idea of an underlying order and harmony in the universe.
Okay.
He saw mathematics as a bridge between the world of the senses and a deeper, more eternal realm
Okay.
of perfect forms and ideas.
So we're moving from triangles to the realm of pure ideas.
Yeah.
This is where it gets a little mind-bending, right?
It can be.
Yeah.
But stick with me. For Plato, these forms weren't just abstract concepts.
Okay.
They were the true reality. The blueprints from which everything in the physical world is derived.
Okay.
Think of it like this.
Okay.
Imagine the perfect form of a chair.
Perfect form of a chair.
It's not any particular chair that you can see or touch,
Right.
but the ideal essence of chairness
Chairness.
from which all actual chairs are modeled.
So the chairs we see in the world are like imperfect copies
Precisely.
of this ideal chair blueprint that exists in a realm beyond our senses.
Precisely. And this applies not just to chairs,
Okay.
but to everything.
They're everything.
Justice, beauty, truth, all have their perfect forms in this eternal realm.
Okay.
And this is key to understanding Plato's theory of immortality.
Okay.
He believed that our souls, before being born into physical bodies, resided in this realm of forms,
Okay.
directly experiencing these perfect essences.
This is like our souls came preloaded with knowledge
That's the idea.
of these perfect forms, but then we forget it when we're born into the physical world.
And throughout our lives, we're constantly trying to remember,
Okay.
to reconnect with those eternal truths that our souls once knew.
This reminds me of that famous quote from Socrates: "The unexamined life is not worth living."
Ah, yes.
Maybe Socrates, Plato's teacher, was hinting at this very idea that true knowledge comes from looking inward
Yes.
and trying to recall those innate truths that lie hidden within us.
That's a brilliant connection. And this brings us to the heart of Plato's argument
Okay.
for the soul's immortality.
Okay.
He reasoned that because the soul can grasp these eternal, unchanging forms, it must itself be eternal and unchanging.
So if we can understand concepts like perfect justice or perfect beauty,
yes.
which don't change or decay,
Right.
then maybe a part of us, our soul, must also be beyond the reach of time and decay.
Exactly. And this idea that the soul is immaterial and eternal is a cornerstone of Plato's philosophy
Okay.
and has had a profound impact on Western thought, especially in the realm of religion.
I know we're just scratching the surface here.
Yes.
And we have a whole series ahead of us to explore these ideas further.
We do.
But before we dive deeper into the specifics of Plato's theory of immortality, I think it's important to acknowledge
Okay.
that not everyone agreed with his conclusion.
Of course. Of course.
And one of Plato's most prominent critics was Bertrand Russell,
Oh, Bertrand Russell.
a 20th century philosopher
Right.
who, while acknowledging the brilliance of Greek thought,
Yes.
also pointed out its limitations.
So while Russell appreciated Plato's insights, he wasn't afraid to challenge his assumptions.
Exactly. I'm guessing this has something to do with the differences between ancient Greek thought
Yes.
and modern science.
Exactly. Russell argued that while the Greeks were masters of logic
Right.
and deduction, they didn't always test their ideas against the empirical evidence of the physical world.
So they might have built beautiful, logically sound systems of thought.
Yeah.
But they didn't always ground those systems in observation and experimentation,
Yes.
the way modern science does.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Russell uses a fascinating example to illustrate this point.
Okay.
The story of Aristarchus,
Aristarchus.
a Greek astronomer who actually proposed a heliocentric model of the solar system.
Wait, the Greeks knew about the Earth revolving around the sun.
Well, Aristarchus did propose it,
Wow.
but his idea didn't exactly catch on.
Okay.
In fact, another philosopher named Cleanthes
Okay.
thought Aristarchus should be charged with impiety
Impiety.
for suggesting that the Earth, the hearth of the universe, was in motion.
Wow, talk about resistance to new ideas. They wanted to put him on trial.
It gives you a sense of how deeply ingrained certain beliefs were
Yeah.
and how challenging the status quo could be, even in a society that valued intellectual inquiry like ancient Greece.
This makes me wonder, if Aristarchus's idea had been accepted,
Yeah.
how would that have changed the course of Western thought? Would we have reached our current understanding of the universe centuries earlier?
That's a question historians and philosophers continue to debate.
Right.
But it certainly highlights the importance of being open to new ideas,
Yes,
even if they challenge our deeply held beliefs.
I agree.
And this openness to questioning, to challenging assumptions, is at the heart of philosophical inquiry.
Absolutely. And as we delve deeper into Plato's theory of immortality,
Yes.
I encourage you to keep this spirit of inquiry alive.
Yes.
Don't just accept what we're saying. Question it,
Right.
challenge it,
Yes.
and see where your own exploration takes you.
Exactly. After all, that's what Plato would have wanted.
Now let's shift our focus back to Plato
Okay.
and the specifics of his theory.
Yes. Let's unpack his arguments and see how they hold up
Right.
in light of both ancient and modern perspectives.
I'm excited for that.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Plato's theory of immortality.
Now, before we went on that tangent about Aristarchus, we were talking about how Plato believed
Yes.
that because the soul can grasp these eternal, unchanging forms,
Yes.
it must itself be eternal and unchanging.
Exactly.
And I'm still grappling with this idea of forms.
Okay.
It feels so abstract.
Yeah.
How do we even know they exist
Right.
if they're beyond our senses?
That's a valid question.
Yeah,
And one that has been debated for centuries.
right.
But for Plato, the existence of the forms wasn't just a matter of faith
Okay.
or speculation.
Yeah.
He developed a series of arguments to support his claims.
So if he wasn't just saying, trust me, there's this invisible world of perfect ideas out there,
Right.
he actually tried to prove it.
Exactly.
Wow.
One of his most compelling arguments focuses on our ability
Okay.
to understand abstract concepts
Uh-huh.
like justice, beauty, and equality.
Okay.
Plato argued that we can't derive knowledge of these concepts
Yeah.
from the physical world alone.
So like if I see a beautiful sunset or hear a beautiful piece of music,
Right.
that doesn't necessarily tell me what beauty itself is.
Yeah.
It's just one example of something I perceive as beautiful.
Yes, precisely.
Right.
Plato believed that our very ability to conceptualize these abstract notions,
Okay.
to even have the idea of beauty in our minds,
Yeah.
suggests that we've encountered a more perfect, unchanging form of beauty
Okay.
somewhere else, sometime before.
So this is where the idea of the soul,
Yes.
pre-existing in the realm of forms, comes in.
Yes.
We're not learning about beauty from the world.
Right.
We're remembering it from a time
Yes.
when our souls were directly connected to the form of beauty itself.
Exactly.
Wow.
And this, for Plato, was evidence that the soul is not material,
Okay.
not bound by the limitations of the physical world.
Right.
It's something separate,
Okay.
something capable of grasping eternal truths.
This raises another question for me, though.
Okay.
If the soul is immaterial,
Yes.
how does it interact with the body?
How does it influence our thoughts, actions, and emotions?
That's a question that has puzzled philosophers for millennia.
Right.
Plato himself uses various analogies
Okay.
to describe this relationship.
Okay.
He compares the soul to a charioteer,
Oh.
trying to control two unruly horses,
Okay.
one representing our desires
Uh-huh.
and passions,
Okay.
the other representing our nobler impulses.
So the soul is like the driver,
Yes.
trying to steer the chariot of our being,
Exactly.
constantly struggling to keep those horses, our desires, and our better nature
Right.
in check.
That's a great way to visualize it.
Yeah, I like that.
And this internal struggle is something we can all relate to,
Oh,
right?
yeah, absolutely.
The battle between our impulses
Yeah.
and our aspirations, our desires,
Yeah.
and our sense of what's right.
We've all had those moments where we know we should do one thing,
Yes.
but our desires pull us in another direction. Exactly. And for Plato, this internal conflict is a reflection of the soul's dual nature,
Okay.
its connection to both the eternal realm of forms
Yeah.
and the transient world of physical experience.
So we're starting to see how all these pieces fit together.
Yes.
The forms, the soul's immortality,
Yes.
the internal struggle between our desires and our higher nature.
Right.
But what does this all mean for how we should live our lives?
That's where Plato's ethics comes in.
Okay.
He believed that the goal of life is to align ourselves with the forms,
Okay.
to strive for wisdom, justice, and beauty in all our actions.
So it's not enough to just understand these concepts intellectually.
Right.
We need to embody them
Yes.
to make them a part of who we are
Yes,
and how we live in the world.
precisely.
Okay.
And for Plato, this pursuit of virtue was closely tied to the idea of the soul's immortality.
Okay.
He believed that by living a virtuous life, by cultivating our reason, and striving for moral excellence, we're preparing our souls for their return to the realm of forms after death.
So it's like we're training for a marathon,
Yeah,
but the finish line is in the eternal realm.
that's a powerful image.
We're trying to get our souls in shape
Right.
for their journey back to that world of perfect beauty and truth.
And this idea that our actions in this life have consequences that extend beyond our physical existence
Right.
has had a profound impact on Western moral thought.
It makes you think twice about those little choices we make every day, doesn't it?
It does.
If our goal is to align ourselves with those eternal values, maybe those seemingly insignificant decisions actually matter quite a bit.
Exactly. And this brings us back to Bertrand Russell
Okay.
and his critique of Greek thought.
Right.
While Russell admired Plato's insights into the human condition, he questioned whether Plato's emphasis on reason
Okay.
and the forms
Yeah.
provided a complete picture of reality.
So Russell, as a champion of the scientific method,
Yeah.
felt that Plato might have overlooked the importance of empirical observation and the role of the senses in our understanding of the world.
Precisely.
Right.
Russell believed that while reason is a powerful tool,
Yeah.
it needs to be grounded in the evidence of our senses.
Okay.
We can't just rely on abstract ideas and logical deductions.
Yeah.
We need to engage with the messy, complex realities of the physical world.
So while Plato might have urged us to look inward,
Yes.
to seek truth in the realm of the forms,
Yes.
Russell reminds us to also look outward,
Yes.
to observe the world around us with curiosity
Yes.
and a critical eye.
And this tension between reason and observation,
Yeah.
between the eternal and the temporal,
Right.
is a theme that we'll encounter again and again as we continue our journey through the history of Western philosophy.
It's like a dance between two partners.
Ooh, I like that.
Reason and observation.
Yeah.
Each contributing their unique strengths
Right.
to the creation of knowledge and understanding.
And the dance is never truly over.
Right.
Each generation of thinkers picks up the rhythm and adds their own steps to the evolving choreography of philosophical inquiry.
I like that. Now, before we get too carried away with the dance metaphors, I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier.
Okay, what's that?
Plato's idea that the soul is like a charioteer
Oh, yes.
trying to control two unruly horses.
That's a key element of Plato's understanding of the soul and its internal struggle.
Right.
He believed that our souls are composed of three parts.
Three parts.
Reason, spirit, and appetite.
But break that down for me. What did he mean by those three parts?
Where reason is the part of us that seeks knowledge, truth, and wisdom.
Oh, yeah.
It's the charioteer, the part that tries to guide our actions towards what is good and right.
So reason is like our inner compass.
Exactly.
Pointing us towards our higher purpose.
Then there's spirit.
Okay.
Which represents our courage, ambition, and drive to achieve.
Right.
It's one of the horses.
Okay.
The one that gives us the energy and motivation to pursue our goals.
I'm starting to see the connection to the chariot analogy here.
Right.
Spirit is the horse that wants to charge ahead.
Yes.
Full steam ahead.
And finally, there's appetite.
Appetite.
Which encompasses our basic desires.
Okay.
For food, pleasure, and comfort.
Right.
This is the other horse. The one that can easily get distracted.
Okay.
And lead us astray if we're not careful.
Appetite.
Yes.
The horse that's always tempted by the roadside snacks and scenic detours.
Precisely.
Right.
And for Plato, the key to a harmonious and virtuous life is to keep these three parts of the soul in balance.
Okay.
Reason needs to be in control.
Right.
Guiding the spirit.
Right.
And keeping the appetites in check.
So it's not about suppressing our desires.
Right.
Or denying our ambition.
Right.
But about channeling them in a way that's aligned with our higher purpose.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's about finding that sweet spot where reason, spirit, and appetite work together in harmony.
Okay.
Guiding us towards a life of wisdom, justice, and fulfillment.
This idea of balance reminds me of the ancient Greek concept of moderation.
Yes.
The idea that virtue lies in finding the middle ground between extremes.
That's a great connection.
Yeah.
And this emphasis on balance and moderation is another theme that we'll encounter throughout our exploration of Western philosophy.
It seems like ancient Greek thought was all about finding that perfect harmony between opposing forces.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it?
It is.
This search for unity amidst diversity.
Right.
For order within chaos.
Right.
And it's a search that continues to shape our understanding of the world and ourselves even today.
Now, I know we're supposed to be focusing on Plato's theory of immortality. But we seem to have wandered into a discussion about the nature of the soul and the pursuit of virtue.
Yeah.
Are we getting off track here?
Not at all.
Okay.
For Plato, these ideas are all interconnected.
Okay.
His theory of immortality isn't just about what happens to the soul after death.
Right.
It's about how we should live our lives in the here and now.
So understanding how the soul functions, how it grapples with its desires and aspirations is essential to understanding why Plato believed it's capable of existing beyond the physical body.
Exactly. The very qualities that Plato attributes to the soul, its capacity for reason, its longing for beauty and truth, its ability to grasp eternal concepts, are the very qualities that he believes make it immortal.
Okay.
This is starting to make more sense to me now.
Yeah.
Plato's theory of immortality isn't just a philosophical abstraction.
Right.
It's deeply intertwined with his ideas about ethics, psychology, and the human condition.
Precisely.
And as we delve deeper into his arguments, you'll see how these seemingly disparate threads weave together to form a rich and complex tapestry of thought.
Okay. I'm ready to dive back into the specifics of Plato's theory.
Okay.
What are some of his key arguments for the soul's immortality?
Well, one of his most famous arguments is based on the concept of recollection.
Recollection?
Which we touched upon earlier.
Okay.
Plato believed that learning is actually a process of remembering.
Remembering.
What our souls already knew from their time in the realm of forms.
So when we learn something new, it's not that we're acquiring knowledge from scratch.
Right.
It's more like we're unlocking a memory.
Yes.
That was already stored in our souls.
Exactly. And Plato uses a fascinating example to illustrate this point.
Okay.
A slave boy.
A slave boy.
Who, through a series of questions, is able to solve a complex geometrical problem.
Okay.
Even though he's never been taught geometry.
Wait, so Plato suggests
that
this uneducated slave boy somehow had innate knowledge of geometry.
Yeah.
How's that possible?
Plato argues that the boy's ability to solve the problem demonstrates that his soul must have encountered the principles of geometry in a previous existence in the realm of forms.
Right.
The questioning simply helped him to recollect what he already knew deep down.
Okay. I can see how that would be a compelling argument for someone living in Plato's time.
Right.
But how would he explain this phenomenon today?
Right.
With our modern understanding of psychology and brain development?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's one that continues to spark debate among philosophers and scientists.
Right.
Some modern thinkers might interpret Plato's example as evidence of our innate cognitive abilities, our capacity for abstract thought. And problem solving that emerges as our brains develop.
So maybe it's not that we're literally remembering knowledge from a past life, but that our brains are wired in a way that allows us to grasp certain fundamental concepts and principles.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this highlights one of the challenges of interpreting ancient philosophical texts.
What's that?
How do we reconcile their ideas with our current scientific understanding of the world?
It's like trying to translate a text.
Yes.
From one language to another.
Exactly.
There's always the risk of losing some of the nuance and original meaning in the process.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that's why it's so important to approach these texts with both respect for their historical context and a critical eye that allows us to question and reinterpret their ideas in light of our own knowledge and experience.
Now, I know we're running out of time.
Okay.
For this part of our deep dive.
Okay.
But before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more argument. That Plato uses to support his theory of immortality.
Yes. The argument from opposites.
The argument from opposites. Okay, what's that all about?
Plato believed that everything in the physical world comes into being from its opposite. For example, day comes from night. Hot from cold. Big from small.
Right.
And he applied the same logic to life and death.
So if life comes from death, then death must also come from life.
Exactly.
Wow.
Plato argued that if the soul didn't exist before birth, then there would be nothing for it to come into being from at the moment of death. Therefore, the soul must pre-exist the body. And continue to exist after the body dies.
I can see how that would have been a persuasive argument in Plato's time. But does it still hold water today? Given our understanding of biology and the physical processes of life and death?
That's a question we can explore further in our next segment.
Okay, I'm looking forward to delving into that and more. But for now, we'll have to leave it there. Join us next time as we continue our deep dive into Plato's theory of immortality and explore how his ideas have reverberated through the centuries, shaping Western thought and inspiring countless thinkers to grapple with the mysteries of life, death, and the human soul.
Until then, keep those minds questioning.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been on quite a journey with Plato, exploring his theory of immortality, his concept of the forms, and his ideas about the soul.
And we ended last time with Plato's argument from opposites.
Right, the idea that life and death are part of a continuous cycle.
Each giving rise to the other.
Right. And I'm curious to hear your take on how this argument holds up in light of our modern understanding. Of biology and the physical processes of life and death?
Well, from a scientific perspective, we now know that death isn't simply the opposite of life. It's the cessation of biological processes, the breakdown of complex systems that keep the body functioning. There's no empirical evidence to suggest that death gives rise to new life in the way that, say, night gives rise to day.
So while Plato's argument might have made sense in his time, it doesn't quite fit with our current scientific understanding of the world.
Exactly. But that doesn't mean his argument is without merit.
Right.
It's important to remember that Plato wasn't approaching these questions from a purely scientific perspective.
Right.
He was a philosopher concerned with exploring the nature of reality and the human condition through the lens of reason and logic.
So while his conclusions might not align with modern science, his arguments still offer valuable insights into how humans have grappled with these existential questions.
Throughout history.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this brings us back to Bertrand Russell and his critique of Greek thought.
While Russell acknowledged the brilliance of Plato's reasoning, he also highlighted the limitations of relying solely on deductive logic and abstract concepts.
Right. Russell argued that true knowledge requires a balance of reason and observation, of abstract thinking and empirical evidence.
Exactly. And this is where Plato's theory of immortality encounters its most significant challenge from a modern perspective.
Okay.
While his arguments might be logically sound, they lack the kind of empirical support that we've come to expect in the realm of science.
So even if we find Plato's ideas intriguing or emotionally resonant, we can't just accept them on faith.
Right.
We need to test them against the evidence of the world around us.
Exactly. And this is where the conversation between philosophy and science becomes so important.
Okay.
Philosophy can help us to frame the big questions, to explore different ways of thinking about the world and ourselves. But ultimately, it's science that provides the tools to test those ideas and determine which ones hold up to scrutiny.
This makes me think of Plato's allegory of the cave.
Oh, yes.
Where prisoners are chained in a dark cave, only able to see shadows projected on the wall.
Right.
They mistake these shadows for reality until one prisoner escapes and experiences the world outside the cave, illuminated by the sun.
That's a brilliant connection. Plato's allegory can be interpreted in many ways, but one reading suggests that the shadows represent our limited perception of reality based on our senses, while the world outside the cave represents a higher truth that can only be accessed through reason and contemplation.
So maybe Russell, as a champion of the scientific method, would argue that we need to break free from the chains of the cage and embrace the light of empirical observation to truly understand the world.
It's a compelling interpretation. And it highlights the ongoing tension between different ways of knowing, different paths to truth. Plato might have emphasized the importance of reason and introspection, while Russell stressed the role of observation and experimentation.
But maybe it's not an either-or proposition. Maybe we need both. The light of reason to illuminate the path, and the tools of science to help us navigate the terrain.
It's about finding that dynamic balance between different approaches, recognizing the strengths and limitations of each.
Now, before we wrap up our deep dive into Plato's theory of immortality, I'm going to touch on one more point. We've talked about how his ideas have been challenged by modern science.
Right.
But it's important to acknowledge the profound impact his thinking has had on Western thought, especially in the realm of religion.
Absolutely. Plato's concept of the soul, its immaterial nature, and its potential for eternal existence has resonated deeply with many religious traditions.
Right, and we see this influence most clearly in Christianity, where the idea of the soul's immortality became a cornerstone of theological doctrine.
Exactly. Christian theologians like St. Augustine were deeply influenced by Plato's philosophy, incorporating his ideas into their own understanding of God, the soul, and the afterlife.
So even though some of Plato's specific arguments might not hold up to modern scrutiny, his broader vision of the soul's journey, its longing for transcendence, and its potential for eternal life has continued to shape Western culture and spirituality for centuries.
Precisely. And this enduring influence speaks to the power of Plato's ideas, their ability to capture something profound about the human experience, our longing for meaning, purpose, and connection to something beyond the transient world of our senses.
It's like Plato planted a seed that has continued to blossom in different forms throughout history, inspiring generations of thinkers, artists, and spiritual seekers.
And as we continue our journey Through the history of Western philosophy, we'll see how this seed has taken root and flourished in unexpected ways, shaping our understanding of ourselves, the world, and the mysteries of existence.
Well, on that note, I think we've reached the end of the deep dive into Plato's theory of immortality. I hope you've enjoyed this exploration as much as I have.
It's been a pleasure.
And remember, this is just the beginning of our adventure.
Yes.
Through the vast and fascinating landscape of Western philosophy.
We have so much more to explore.
We have 60 more deep dives to go, each one exploring a different thinker. And their unique perspective on the big questions that have captivated humanity for millennia. So stay tuned, get ready to dive deep into the world of ideas, where the pursuit of truth and understanding is an endless and endlessly rewarding journey. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep those minds engaged.
See you next time.